Beneficial care with
Well, good morning. It's still morning. All you non-football fans, or ones that find modeling more important in football. No, you're a football fan?
Raiders aren't doing good this year, so this is more fun.
Well, I'm going to keep out of it. Actually, I watch football now and then because my family likes it more than I do. It's not that I'm against it. I'm a big football fan. Anyway, so we started late because people are still wandering in, and the traffic, I guess, is really bad out there. So what this clinic's going to be is Mike's going to do most of it, but I want to do the introduction. And we're going to talk about build a module. This is the final, build a memory. This is the final installment, but we're going to review everything from start to finish, and then there'll be time to ask questions. We're not, because this is a little too nice, we're not going to do scenery. We're going to talk about how we do it, but we're not going to do it here because it'd be a mess, okay? So just to give you a little bit of history on this, and there are handouts back there for everybody. To give you a little bit of history, Charlie Getz came to Mike and I a while ago and asked if we do build a memory. We did one in HO, and while there's plans out there, back there for it, while that was very successful and people really liked it, it was close to impossible to transport. Is that appropriate?
Yeah.
So we talked to Charlie about doing one in N scale, and we made some big changes. This is only a little around 3 foot wide, so it's actually. I think this is build a memory. Maybe leave one door open so people can find it. So we did it in N scale, and we used the track plan that Cato has. We used all Cato track, and just as a brief comment, the Cato track, we used Bachman for the HO. The Cato track is a much, correct?
Yes. Well, we have to spike the switches on the HO one to get the train from stay on the rails.
And it's not like we're hacks at this thing. So we did it in N scale, and this is what we're going to be showing from now on. It's transportable, and anybody in here with even minimal skills could build this. And while we have a list of materials and tools, you don't actually have to have everything. You can get by without some of the tools. And then one of the questions we always have is about how much money. I'm going to rough out and say it's about $500 as it exists here, but we have to make it a lot more rigid for transportation. We have to make it a little more, a little bigger as far as height goes. We have to have the legs. If you didn't do all of that, it would take quite a bit of cost out. This will be, we will do an article.
Well, that cost is the superstructure, not the scenery, not the trains, not the buildings.
Right. And the scenery, when we get to that, I'll probably should cover that. You'll see that you can get by really inexpensively. Most of the scenery, I think if you took all the scenery other than the trees, we're talking about a few dollars. Okay? So, Mike, you want to take over?
Okay, I'm going to start at the beginning, and if y'all have been through the ones we've given, this will be the 4th clinic we've given on this. I'm going to start right back at the beginning. And the beginning is this module right here. And this is the basic structure, and this is what makes it all possible and all very easy to do. This is the rigid insulation foam, which is not easy to find in the Bay Area, but it is available. We have a handout that shows a couple of places that you can find it. When you get toward the valley, some of the big box stores carry it, but not in the Bay Area itself. All this is 1x4s, outside frame, 1x2, inside frame, and the blue foam or pink foam, same stuff, just different manufacturer. It's just glued on. And it's glued on with liquid nails. And the reason I use liquid nails because it's a soap and water cleanup. There are special materials made for the foam, but they're not as easy to handle, deal with. The only drawback to this is it takes a little longer to dry. And that's the only drawback to it. Glue it to the frame, then you have to put some weight on it or something to keep it while it's drying. There's one little technique that I've picked up over the years. I don't know if you can see the little holes in this. Deck screws. You glue it together and screw it together with deck screws. And that'll hold it together and put enough pressure on it until the glue dries. I use deck screws because we're going to put a lot of wet scenery stuff on it, and they will hold up better than standard wood screws. So the first step is the frame, and you just get that. You can get it at hardware or big box stores, lumber yards. Most of those places will either cut it the size for you or provide a saw so you can cut it yourself. Like Home Depot does that. Some of the other lumber yards will cut it. They charge $1 a cut or something. But we're not talking about very many cuts. We got 4 pieces of wood for the frame, 2 cross braces. You could probably get away without the cross braces if you're not moving it anywhere. The legs are a simple L girder, 2x3s put together in L girder fashion. And then this is one of the changes that Frank and I made. The instructions didn't have this little 2x2 insert, which we drilled and put an adjustable foot in for leveling, which especially when you're carrying it around, it's important. And if you live in San Francisco or most of the Bay Area, I don't think there's a level floor around, so I think it's important even if you don't move it. And this is just simply glued and screwed together. And then the height, we have it kind of high, but it's good for a couple of reasons. It's good to work on when it's high, and what we've found out is we've taken it to some shows, and it would be totally destroyed if it was lower and reachable for little hands, which they really like to look at it, but it is a real...
I'm going to add in the build memory handout, which is back there. It's actually about 6 inches higher.
Yeah,
And that doesn't work.
they didn't take into account the extra 4 inches of the foam when they figured that out. That was way too high. And I think we made these, but it's about a counter height once we put this on here. About a standard counter height, maybe an inch or 2 higher.
And we use 2-inch foam, but you can get by with 1 inch.
Especially if you're not moving it around. And there are different densities of this foam. The denser, stronger foam costs a little more. The less dense foam costs a little less, and it's all you need. Now, in terms of cutting the foam is real easy. You can use a hacksaw blade, and that will cut it very nicely, and it causes a huge mess. You have all this plastic chibble around. You can use hot knives or hot wires, and these work very well. You do want to work in a ventilated area because there is fumes associated with this. And also, there's rheostats in these, especially the Hot 9, and you can only cut for a certain while, and it'll turn itself off, and you have to let it cool before you start it. Those are almost a necessity for doing the curve cuts and the angle cuts. To make straight cuts, it's real easy. It's just like working with styrene. I forgot my straight edge today, so I'm going to try. Let's see if I can use this. All I did, used the straight edge, made a slight cut, just like styrene. It doesn't matter if it's 2 inch, 1 inch, 1.5 inch. And that's the best way to make straight cuts. The next step, after we put the foam on, we get our general basic contours we want. We cover it with plastic cloth for the first step in the scenery. And plastic cloth, you know, there's Woodland Scenic and Scenic Express, and you actually used to be able to go to medical supply places and get it. They don't carry it anymore because they use some sort of fiberglass for broken limbs now. At one point, I missed getting a great supply real cheap because they'd just gotten rid of all they had. They'd given it to somebody because they weren't carrying that anymore in the medical supply place. The utility knife, the hot knife, and there's one other knife I need to mention. Woodland Scenic makes it's an X-Acto type knife, but it's a special long blade that they make, and it's nice for some uses because it'll cut all the way through a 2 inch. Now, both utility knives, X-Acto knives, and these Woodland Scenic knives, this stuff dulls them very quickly. I mean, you've got about 5 or 6 cuts, and it's noticeably dull. And what happens then, you start cutting, and it starts pulling up the edges and breaking. It's not, at this stage, that's not a bad thing, because this is a rough stage to start off with, and you're going to make changes after that. Any questions to this stage? Okay, the next step.
Question?
Yeah.
Closed cell foam, open cell foam? Which one?
I think it's closed.
Closed cell foam, thank
But
you.
it's rigid insulation foam
Right.
is the generic term for it. Anything that's white or has paper backing will not work. It doesn't cut, it doesn't have the strength. Like I said, I think it comes in other colors than other manufacturers. It's Corning and Dow, the pink and the blue. And without, I can't, Dow. Blue is Dow, Corning is pink. And that's the only difference between them. But it's rigid insulation foam. Because there's a lot of different kinds of insulation foam, and I believe it's closed cell. But yeah, I'm sure it is, because it doesn't soak up water. It's not a sponge. And that's important. If you didn't use a closed cell, when we start getting some of the scenery techniques, it would just be waterlogged. Even just putting the plaster on would waterlog it. This is the original, about a year ago, we made this original module, and this was 4x4 in HO. And the problem we had with that, 4x4 doesn't fit pickup trucks, SUVs, or anything else with any kind of ease. I figured out how to carry this module in my pickup truck by putting a 5/8 inch plywood over my wheels, and then I can set it on top of that. But at one point, I was carrying a vertical in the truck and going over the bridges, and then I was thinking after I did that, what if it was windy?
And it was a little hairy when we went from my house to his with this in the back.
Yeah.
It was a rainy day and
Yeah, it started, the tie down started slipping a little bit. It was not fun. So if we figured out that, well, what I did is I found, hold that plan up down there. I found this HO track package. This is a package Hutto makes. You can buy it,
It's
everything
in
comes with
and scale.
it, in scale.
I've got to help him out there, so if you need me, I'll be right on.
Okay, and it will fit on a 3x4 layout. Now, it will fit on a 3x4 layout, but I found out when we put it on a 3x4 layout, the outside edge of the track was right on the edge of the board. And so what I did, because I was already at 4 inches, I added 2 inches to each side. And this is extremely easy to do foam. You have the 2-inch foam, you have the deck nails, you have the glue, you slap it on, you put a couple of deck nails through and let it dry. And that's what's on the end of this module here. These ends are 2-inch foams. The wood sizes on the handouts, avoid doing this, it's to the right side. It's 52 inches, I think, which gives you a couple of inches on each side of the track. So you're don't have the track on the edge. So every time you do stuff like this, you figure out some things that can be refined. We refined the HO and 4x4 was not a good thing to do with this demonstration module because of the transportation and also because of the Bachmann track, which was a track package from Bachmann also that fit in this, and the Bachmann track just isn't very good. Mostly the switches. I mean, if you just had a Bachmann oval, that would work fine. But the switches really started to come apart. Now, building up. Notice this, I have it built up. And how you do that, you just add foam. And what I have here. You have a sandwich of different pieces of foam that will fit in the corners. Then I have another sandwich of foam here, which I'll put there. And then my last sandwich of foam goes over. And what that gives me, it gives me mountains, it gives me a tunnel, and everything I need. Now you notice everything has sharp edges there. Well, you don't want to end up with sharp edges. So how do you take care of that? Well, before you put the plastic cloth on, you carve off your edges to whatever degree you want. And this is where the hot knives really come in handy. And the longer woodland scenic knife for carving these down. That's all the cutting I'm going to do here because it makes a mess after a while. So you round this off to whatever you want. That still won't be the finished product, but it'll be the finished base. And you also want to run your track pan before you fasten any of this down, because it's much easier to figure out your track plan ahead of time. If you're using a package like this, you already have the track pan. Now this package gave two capabilities. You could have a ground level crossing, or you could have a crossover. I decided to do a crossover because it's more interesting looking, and actually the 3x4 looks bigger when there's some height to it on the back of it. And it's just afterwards, or sometimes during, you come back here, look behind this, and you can see where the crossover is. I left most of this back open Because there's a rule of thumb about model railroads. If there's some place that's inaccessible, that's where you're gonna have problems. Guaranteed, no matter how well you put stuff together. So you make things as accessible as possible, even on small layouts. Any questions so far? So we've got our scenery on it. Then we start laying the plastic cloth. And as we show here, the plastic cloth is a solid, but not thick base. Actually, wait a minute, let me back up a step. Before we lay the plastic cloth, we want to lay the track. And this is a modular track, a very good modular track, and I lay this with double face tape. There's a double face tape that's made by 3M for putting up signs. There's an indoor version and an outdoor version. The indoor version works fine. And you can come up later and see, I think it's the ½ inch or what did I use, 2 strips of tape. I put my tape down. Well, I put my track down first, and then I draw an outline around the track. Then I pull the track up, put the tape down, put the track on top of the tape. And that's all there is. There's no drying time, there's nothing, it's done. The only thing you have to be careful with is on the switches. You have to make sure you've got, especially the small switches, this comes with number 4 switches. With PowerTrack, switches are power routing. That means, in this case, what it means is if I throw this switch and put something in the siding, I can put an engine in the siding, I can throw the switch, and that'll kill the power to that siding. And then I can run a second engine around the layout. On these number 4 switches, you have to set that before you put it down. Once they're down, they're down. The number 6 switches, which are bigger, only go one way, so you don't have to worry about that. But on any of these modular system switches, they have a base underneath. They all have the motors built in. So you can use them manually or motor. You're paying for a motorized switch no matter what, even if you use them manually. But they're built in, and there's a base on them. If you put them down on the sticky stuff, and for some reason you want to pull them up, which you can do, you do run the risk of pulling the base off, so you have to be careful when you're doing that. And if you, like I say, if you set the switch power routing or non-power routing, you want to do that before you put it down. Now the only reason to do non-power routing is if you're doing DCC, and that doesn't really matter how you're doing it. This is set up so we can run a DCC or DC. A DCC is the system where you have basically a chip in each engine, and both the information and the power comes through the track, and you're telling each engine individually what to do. Standard DC, you're telling the track what to do, and the engine reacts to that. So a standard DC with power routing, we can put engines on the 2 sidings, flip the switch, and they'll sit there without any power going to them, then run another engine. And so that's the advantage of that. I recommend DCC over DC, even for small layouts. I think it's even actually probably more advantage for small layouts, because it's real hard to do a bunch of blocks that mean anything in terms of power, turning the track on and off. With DCC, you could run, theoretically, you could run 10 engines on this independently. That might be a little crowded, but you can do it. With DC, I could run 3 engines, but only one would be running at a time. Now we're putting the track down. We put the track down. The next step is the power to the track. The more leads to the track, the better. Especially with sectional track. If you don't solder the track together, you have an electrical problem. So I have to pick it up and look. I think I have 6 leads to the small ladder. The only part of the track that I don't have a lead to are the 2 sidings, so that the power routing switches will work.
You want me to lift? We can look.
Yeah, we can look. We can show. The blue and white wires are the power. I have a, let's put it totally on its side. I have a bus line running the length of it, and I have my track leads coming to that bus line. And I've set this up since we moved this around, so I can hook up power on either side. If you're doing that at home and not moving around, you don't have to worry about that. But I did it so that it makes it easier for us when we take it to shows and where power might be. Now the red and black you see here, those are the power switches. And I just put those in to keep that capability for us if we ever decide to use it in the future. We may decide to use it, we may not. If you're doing your own home layout, you'd probably want to use it.
Question.
Yeah.
How did you drill the holes that size to get exactly where it needed to be with the track? You didn't obviously had to drill from above, right?
Yeah.
But that's a pretty big hole. You didn't need to put that big a hole through the, or did you?
What do you mean?
Well, I saw the size of the holes, like 1/4-inch diameter holes.
Oh, that was for the switch
Yeah.
wire, because they have a big,
There's a big connector on
there's a
the
big connector on the switch,
So basically you do have that big a hole go all the way
That
through.
big a hole going all the way through, but it's right under the track.
So you don't see it?
You don't see it.
Okay.
With the leads, it's just the power leads, it's just the width of 2 wires. Yeah, that was strictly for the switches, and if you really wanted to, you could cut those off, use a little hole, put the wire on, and then put them back on. It's just a, let me see if I got it right here. Well,
It's actually easier just to cut it, and then I always worry about cutting wires, splicing it, you gotta put heat sink or something around it.
but the Kano system uses these, I don't know, you can see there's a little plastic, it's a clip, it's a fail-safe clip. It's a good connection, but it's big. And they use the same clip.
Let me pass this around so you can.
This is the switch, switch, or the turnout switch. And it's designed to connect directly to their power pack, or there's another little connection that you can put on and it'll connect to anybody's power pack. But it's the big head on them that you have to push through. With the foam, it's real simple. Just make it oversized, put it under the track, and it's not seen. Any other questions?
How did you get the grade?
I don't know, 3% grade. Good. The grade, I've forgotten about that. Woodland Scenic makes risers in different degrees, 1 degree, 2 degree, 3 degree. And so that's what I used. I used a 2-degree Woodland Scenic risers. And that's the easiest way of doing it. And for that easiest way, they're sort of like an accordion, and it's very flexible. And the easiest way of putting those down is you put them where you want them. There's some they sell long T-pins that you can put them in place and hold them. And then I use hot glue to put them down because it dries real quick. And I've been using, I just got this hot glue. This is a high heat industrial grade hot glue gun. I've been using the small ones with the lower heat for a long time. They work perfectly fine with these.
Don't you run the risk of melting foam or
It's
use that?
not that hot. I mean, and you don't. Yeah, if you put the tip of this on it, it'll melt it, definitely. But just the glue coming out, actually you want it to melt it a little bit because that's part of the adhesive process. But it doesn't really.
And I've used a great big glue gun, no problem at all. I mean, you know, I would prefer the small one, but I'm not gonna buy another one.
And then, you know, what I did on this is I got a 1-inch blue foam for here, and then I brought from flat up to this, a riser, and then I went from top of that up to here, another riser, and the back here is a riser going up. You can see the crossover back here when we take a break and come back and look at it. But those, they're not called risers. They have two things, ones that are sloped and ones that are
Is it
1 inch, 2
subterranean?
inch, 3 inch height. And I think,
Subterranean.
yeah, but I think they call the single height risers, and I forget what they call the sloped ones. They call that something different. But it comes in different degrees. You want to use as low a rise as possible as you have room for. I got this with 2 inch. Anything higher than that, you could run into problems of pulling trains with some of the smaller engines. I made a my first layout that I made since coming back to the hobby after leaving it as a teenager. I made a 4-inch pre-19 or 4-degree rise on a pre-1900 layout and used little 404s, 440s rather, engines, and tried to pull 2 cars up it, and the engine couldn't pull itself up it, let alone 2 cars. So I learned that way. If you're doing a modern layout, most of the modern in-scale engines especially are way overpowered for anything like this in terms of having trouble getting stuff up. Especially the SD series and the GE diesels that have 6-wheel trucks that are all powered.
You'll see also that we have it open through the tunnel. You can close that, but you really want to be able to get in here when there's a problem. And I don't think we've ever had a problem.
Not inside.
So, but if you closed it, we would. My layout at home, I'm in a larger scale, I've gone to dead rail because getting back there to clean the track is impossible. And I don't care what scale you're in, you need to clean the track if you're not running dead rail.
Okay, now we're at the risers. You put the risers down, of course, before you put the track down. You put the track down right on top of the risers, the same way as this. Put the double face tape and use that. I'll stick to the risers. So you have your foam, you have your support, you have your foam down, you have your risers, you have your track down. The next step is the sub-base of the scenery, which is the plastic cloth. And that just goes like we see here. I lap it over the side. We have found the problem about lapping over the side. It adds a little more thickness to the top part. This is a fascia we've put on, and because I lapped over the sanding cloth, the top is a little.
And he didn't help me put the fascia on. I should have made him come out. But it's a problem. I had to bend it. My recommendation is that you cut the foam just slightly smaller than the frame. This is what I recommend in the future. And then if you lap it over, it's not a problem. And make sure it doesn't go over this plane at all, because the other sides are going to be a problem too. By the way,
we put the plaster, but whenever the modular Yosemite short line, we just painted the foam. The plaster cloth, I think, is better, particularly at home, but on the Yosemite short line, weight is really important. Not that it adds that much weight, but we just painted it.
After adding the plaster cloth, and sometimes, I don't know, well, I guess, I worked in my basement, which is an open basement in the city in San Francisco. And it took over a week for my plaster cloth to dry. It took, and this was before the rain started, so I don't know what that,
The humidity is very high.
yeah.
We just sold the place in San Francisco, so we know. It
Yeah.
is so wet that paint doesn't dry.
Yeah,
And we'll get to that too,
Yeah.
you've seen it.
and this doesn't dry even slower than paint.
Question.
Yep.
When you put the plaster cloth on, do you put plaster over the cloth?
No, what I just do is, there's plenty of plaster embedded in it, and I use cheap paintbrushes and just spread the plaster around.
Okay.
It's already in.
And I'm a little messier, I use my
To
fingers.
dry it?
Hard's fine.
Could you use a heat gun to dry your plastic?
You probably could, but some of those heat guns are pretty hot, and they might start melting the foam.
Well,
A hair dryer,
Hair dryer would be a better idea, a heat gun. I have a heat gun at home, I'm an electrical engineer, and I melted this foam. It goes so fast, it's like scary. So I wouldn't use a heat gun.
well, they have different settings on it.
Yeah, I had it on the lowest setting, the heat gun would go.
It still won't melt.
I went like this, and there was a hole. I mean, literally like that. Yeah.
Yeah, a hair dryer is much better on that because you've got a lot lower heat and it takes a little longer to do it, but that'll dry the back of the plaster as well as the front of the plaster without curling it up on
And
you.
the other thing about the heat guns has the heat is
Concentrate.
focused.
Right.
On a hair dryer, you can get the hair dryer I use, you can tell. Hair dryer I use goes like this, so it covers, maybe 6 by 6.
Yeah, my wife has a little flare-on attachment or something like
Yeah.
that. That seems to work a lot better. You're right about the heat guns too. They get, the two settings are burn and melt.
but mine was so damp that a heat gun may have saved me a day, but it wouldn't have saved much more than that. So we've got the plaster down, plaster cloth, the tracks down, the plaster. Oh, before you start the plaster cloth, get the blue painter's tape and cover all your rails.
Don't use masking tape. It leaves residue.
Yeah.
Blue painter's tape seems to work best.
Have you tried the green stuff? The green
I
tape?
tried the green, it's expensive.
But does it work also?
Yeah, actually, it's better.
It's better, but it's more expensive.
Yeah.
And they all leave a little residue. You still have to clean your track after the fact.
But the masking tape, that just doesn't want to come up. And you leave it on for a week and you're in.
Forget it.
Yeah. Yep.
What's the difference between the green and the blue?
The green has the moisture barrier.
It's a finer edge also.
Different brand.
It's great for painting. I mean, you could paint, like a chair rail type thing around here. It'd be perfect.
There's even a blue with a finer edge, but we don't need a finer edge because we're just protecting what's underneath. We're not trying to define an edge. And you want to use, especially you want to use the blue or the green for the switches because the switches are a little more delicate and you don't want things sticking to that because especially in N-scale you can bend the points. So you want something as untacky as possible but tacky enough to hold it down and protect the rail surface.
Don't use duct tape.
Don't no. Or gaffers.
Gaff tape's better, but don't use gaff tape.
Now, there's one thing to look out for, which will happen no matter what, is all of these modular track switches are real susceptible to having glue go into them during the season. There is, so you want to try to avoid that at all possible costs. But no matter what you do, you're not going to be able to avoid it. But all is not, when you finish everything and you start to switch your switch and it doesn't switch, don't force it. There is a solution. And it's called alcohol in a can of air. You just put alcohol inside the switch wherever there's a spot that's open. Usually at the throw there's an opening, and at the points there's an opening. You let it sit a while, and then use a can of air to blow it out. And you might have to do that a few times, but that'll clean out all the glue that's in it.
Unless you're using Bachman switches.
And then once you got it cleaned out, I use the graphite, like Microtrains, Katie has for their couplers, to just lubricate the switches. But they have to be clean and dry before you put that in. Now, we've got the track down, then we've got our scenery, our basic scenery the way we want it. We put down the plaster cloth, and then the next step.
So I'll cover the next step. I'm going to do it what I would recommend, not necessarily how we did it every time. Both of these we did in a hurry. The HO one we did in literally 4 weeks. This one was more like 2 months, right?
Well, we did it over the last 3 clinics.
Last 3 clinics. So we have
Not full time anyway.
So when you have the water, the first thing I would do, and I did it on the HO one, is I make sure that it's totally sealed. Use a good sealer on it and do a couple coats, because when you pour the resin, which I'll get to, when you pour the resin, if you have a pinhole, it finds it and then it's all over your floor.
Yeah.
Okay.
On this one, I used a deck and floor epoxy paint.
On the HO one, I used a sealer, I forget what it was, but it was water-based. Be careful with oil-based stuff. Okay, so do this, make sure it's totally sealed. Then, here's what I would recommend. You want an earth color then on top for the rest of it, and even the river or stream or pond, whatever. And you could go to Home Depot and they have the stuff that's mixed, that isn't, or Lowe's, that, you know, the people wasn't perfect. Get something that's just near an earth color. Any sort of brown, brownish gray, anything, because you'll pay half the price or less for that. And it isn't critical, okay? What I actually we used on here was some of the inexpensive little American
Stuff you get at Revolution Rifles.
or
The water,
a
they're not
Walmart.
watercolors, they're water-based paints.
I think they were like, I get them at Walmart for 99 cents. But on other things where you got a bigger area, I just buy a can from Home Depot, it'll be cheaper. Paint it, let it dry. Again, I don't live in San Francisco, but I'm down the peninsula. When I did the HO one, it didn't want to dry. And I'm in a garage. I've got the washer next to it, the dryer, you know. But it dries. You know, the paint took a day or two to dry on the HO one. This one, it dried almost immediately. Then the sand, the dirt. Let's talk about that. This dirt was all from Tuolumne, about a block from the Black Oak Casino. Okay. Just get a bucket. I mean, the amount of dirt in here would fill up maybe a 1 pound coffee can at most.
So I filled up, I used almost all that coffee can.
Okay. Oh, a coffee can. Straining it, you can strain it with, you know, you go to the dollar stores. I love dollar stores. You can buy a strainer.
The flour sifters.
Or a flour sifter. And then, if you want a road, a fine road, get pantyhose, old pantyhose, and use that. That'll strain out so you can get a road like this here. And that works really good. So anyway, after you painted it, and you don't even have to let the paint dry, you can sift the dirt on, yeah,
So let me check the pantyhose question for a minute.
yeah.
I'm gonna walk up to some complete stranger, some probably member of the opposite sex, and say, can I please have your old pantyhose? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I got it from my wife. She doesn't wear them anymore, but she's got a whole drawer full of them. And, but if you can't do pantyhose, you can
Go to that dollar store.
the dollar store probably has pantyhose, you know? And if you go in San Francisco, they won't think anything about it.
Put clips on the Castro.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, I
You can
can
get the knee highs, they're cheaper than
Yeah,
yeah.
full panties.
Yeah.
Is that the voice of experience out there?
You know, I think we're going in an area, I think we better leave. And I don't believe in political correctness, but there is a line that I don't want to cross. Anyway,
I've had some experience with trying to sift natural dirt
Yeah.
to the size. The flower sifters work, but they tend to break because the rocks screw them up. But typically with a flower sister or a typical strainer that you get in the whatever, it never gets it big enough. So the pantyhose approach makes that really fine dust that you need.
so what I do, so I actually have like 4 or 5 strain. You know, I go to the dollar stores and I look for different size holes in the strainer. I got 4 or 5, so I start with a bigger one and then work my way down. Okay, and then I use the pantyhose at the end. But I don't put the raw dirt into the pantyhose. I first sifted it down because what you're talking about is what happens.
Yeah, well, but my point is that just the typical tea strainers or flower sifters, even an HO, it doesn't make it. It looks like they're standing around in a field full of boulders.
Yeah.
So your pantyhose approach, really, you want that
The
fine.
you know, if we had time, I would have done this whole layout with the pantyhose. The problem with the pantyhose, it takes a long time. Okay, so I've got the dirt. You can vary the dirt. You know, I modeled the Sierras. This is sort of the Sierras, but you can get different dirt. You know, if you've got a lot of money to throw away, you can buy what is it, Arizona, the Arizona rock. They have
They have the real dirt, which is really nice and really good to work with.
but it's expensive. So we put it down, and what we do is we use, after we paint it, we use a mixture of white glue and water. We put the dirt down, and then we spray it with any sort of wetting agent. You can use alcohol. You can tell that we drink a lot. You can use alcohol, or you can use. I'm gonna warn you. Some of the soaps react with white glue and make it this gummy substance, and it doesn't dry right. So I like denatured alcohol, or rubbing alcohol. You can buy it, you know, at CVS or Walgreens or Safeway, wherever. And anyway, and spray it.
About a
and-
50-50 alcohol water.
50-50.
works.
Yeah. And then,
I use my eyeglass cleaner bottles. I buy eyeglass cleaners, and when I empty those, then I use that for my spray for spraying on the scenery. Also, I use it as a weathering agent on structures because I dull coat everything. When you dull coat it and then spray it with this alcohol stuff, you get this beautiful weathered look.
okay, so we put the dirt down, we glue it, we spray it with the alcohol mix, then we put the white glue and water, and we mix that down a little bit, about 50-50. And if you've seen the Paul Scholes, I'm going to try and show that after. He has an eyedropper that he puts the glue on. And that works really well, but there's other ways. The eyedropper takes a little bit of time, but it's not bad. I use,
Similar to an eyedropper is the little baby droppers for measuring baby medicines. They're bigger than an eyedropper and it's faster.
or the Woodland Scenics, you know, the thing with the ball for mixing paints. That works great, that's what I use at home, okay?
And if you clean it out after, you have one that'll last you forever.
If you don't clean it out after, you keep buying one every time you use it.
Yeah, which I've done too. Okay, so we put that down. While it's still wet, we'll sprinkle on various shades of green, brown, yellows, whatever you can see up here. And then,
This is the fine foam, fine
finest.
materials you see, not the thicker stuff.
and, at the same time, we may put down some of the little clumps of trees and stuff. And then over here, we've got the rocks, talus. And like about 2 years ago, some guy brought into the auction, so this is one of the few times I bought stuff at the auction, a box of rocks, the bags, that, probably are $5 each. I think I spent $10, and I still got a lot left. And this is the way to do it. Look for stuff inexpensive, okay? You glue that down. Now these, you have to put more glue on. After you do it, you put a couple coats because it will come loose, at least when you're moving it around like us.
And what I will do also is on the thicker stuff is I'll put a base of this Aleene's or anybody's, it's a thick tacky glue. It's just a water-based glue, it's thick, and so you can put it in a spot and then you can stick the stuff into it. But you still have to do what he's saying after that.
One of the things that would really be fun, I really enjoyed working with Mike on this because he showed me things that I didn't know. I think I probably showed him one or two things that he didn't know, and you learn from each other. But one of the things, when we got to putting the trees on, when I put the trees on my home layout, I punched the hole and I grabbed the tree and I go, where the heck did I put the hole? Can't see it, it's sort of self-healed. So he puts a thing in there. I mean, you can do anything, a skewer, stick, whatever. And so he knows where he poked the hole. So I've got that on my list. Next time I have to do trees on my layout, I'll do that. So the trees come, but before we get to the trees, you need to do the base of whatever water. And we've used a few things on the water. I used, on the HO one, magic water. But what you have to do before you do it is make your stream bed, put the rocks or whatever. And you have to put something here, again, so it doesn't leak.
Yes, this is the major part of the water we used on this one.
In this one, we used Envirotex. Both work fine. In my opinion, they're comparable. I use magic water on mine. You can tint it. If you tint it, you have to tint it with a water-based tint. And I can tell you right now, however much tint you put in half as much as you think, because it darkens, okay? The hard way, I found out the hard way. So you put this in, and I would do it before I put the trees on, but you don't have to. And very thin layers and multiple layers. And Mike, you can tell about the waterfall.
Okay. I actually use two different products here. I use what I'm passing around now, and it's about 4 or 5 layers. But up here, there's a Woodland Scenic that just poured out. This is a 2-part epoxy, both the water and this stuff. You mix it 2 parts, mix together, and then you pour it. Woodland Scenic makes a very expensive 1-part water, which looks real good, and you only can put about 1/6 of an inch depth at a time. And that's what I used up here. And I have, on my home layout, I have my $100 river because that's what I started using, and I figured I've gone through $100 worth of the bottles just to get the river.
Buy the one that you don't have to heat. Don't buy the one you have to heat. You'll burn your hand.
Two-part epoxies is what you want. Either the magic water or this stuff you can get at a place like Tap Plastic. But this white area, and then when you look close, you'll see there's some surface texture on this. That doesn't come from these products, because these are very smooth. Woodland Scenics makes a product that's in a squeeze bottle. It's called Water Effects. And it comes out, it looks like white cement coming out, but thick. And that's what I've made the waterfalls with, and the effects on top of the water. The waterfalls are basically this stuff it dries clear and thin, and real thick, it doesn't dry, it stays white. And so that gives me the waterfall effect. To get the surface effect, I just use a brush, just a regular painting brush, to brush it on. And when you come out and look at it, you can see I got a rippling effect here. And it's also an expensive thing, but you're not using very much of it. I mean, I just used up my first bottle that I bought probably 7 or 8 years ago. So it's not something, I mean, you know, I used it on these two layouts, on another diorama that I built, and on my big layout. So it doesn't have a whole lot of expense. And it gives an effect you can't get just with the two-part water.
The other thing about the epoxies, the humidity doesn't affect it as much as the other stuff, but they all say that they dry in 24 hours. And everybody who manufactures it is glad they're not Pinocchio, because they all take 2 to 3 days to actually dry all the way.
And you find that out is after 24 hours, say, oh, it looks dusty, let me brush it off. It'll scratch the surface. And one thing we forgot, you have to put a watertight dam when you're running it off the edges.
I think I said that,
Did you?
but maybe not. Okay, so now you've got the basic scenery done. We sort of forgot to say, you put in all culverts and bridges and stuff before. So we got the basic scenery done. Then this is that fiber, that Woodland Scenics, or you can go to a place that sells pillow material, and you can buy a big bag of it for $1. If we bought that bag, we could all use it on our home layout. There'd be more than enough. So anyway, lots of brown foam. You don't have to spend a lot. I mean, we didn't use hardly anything right here, but it looks good. Then the rocks, this is something else. The rock castings, we have, you know, the things here. And this is something else Mike taught me. I would just make the castings out of plaster, but you color it a little bit. And then if you break it, it doesn't look white.
Yeah, this is just as cast before this has been painted. These are as cast.
You just put a little bit of color in there. Yeah, you can take the chairs.
And the color, again, needs to be a water-based color.
I would suggest everything, just do water-based. Okay.
These are the Bragdon bowls designed for his fiber, because I use lightweight hydrocolor, and they're on that layout. And it works just as, it doesn't work the same, but it gives good results, like his fiberglass results.
Okay, then, so we've done that. We painted the sides because we had to show it at the GT a couple of weeks ago. But if you're just putting fascia board on there, you don't need to. And for the fascia board, I cut it with, this one I cut with skill saw, but usually I use a jigsaw. Mark it, cut it, and to glue to the wood, I clamped it with, I used yellow carpenter's glue. Okay, and that's where I saw the front was blowing out. So the rest of it, I used the liquid nails, and I won't get into how I got it to hold, but it took a while. I really recommend you do what we said earlier, make sure it doesn't go over the edge. We painted it. You don't need to do that if you're doing a fascia board. Okay, and I highly suggest that. It looks really good. Eventually, we will paint that a contrasting color to the other. Then the structures. After the structures are built, this is not on structures of building trees. There'll be clinics coming up on that. But the structures we put in after. We put them in different places, tried, saw what worked. And then we used a knife to just cut, just barely into the plaster. Yeah, we got that. Yeah. So cut into it, and then, you know, it always looks funny to me when somebody just puts structures and they're not looks like they're just sitting on the ground.
I call it, they need to be grounded. I mean, you go outside, and you don't see a light line underneath a building.
So we cut them, we use white glue. We're using white glue for almost everything other than like putting the fascia on. Because if you need to take it up, you can. You can soak it with the alcohol and you can remove it. If you use carpenter's glue, you're done it, you can't. Or epoxy or any of the other glues. So we cut it, then we sprinkle the dirt around it. And so for example, I was looking for that. So if we were going to put that here, say, I can reach there, we'd cut it out, we'd mark it. You know, you can use anything to mark it. I use Sharpie. You put it down, you cut out a little bit, you put glue, you put it in there, put dirt around it, let it dry, and it's embedded in there.
And the only thing I have to watch out for is if you're up against a hill and there's a door, which I didn't pay attention to on this one. So then I had to cut a little walkway out of the hill.
So that's putting the structures on. We use different colored dirt here for the stock pen. So you can detail it out. We're not here to do detail. We've got about 10 minutes at the most left, and then some Q&A. So we've done all we vary the dirt a little bit in color. You can see so that it doesn't look. Oh, we got a pet here. There's an ant. It looks almost like a dinosaur in this scale.
Actually, that's a squirrel.
Oh, that's a squirrel. Good thing I don't have my dogs here, they'd be barking. Let's see, I know I'm leaving a couple things out. Oh yeah, we're gonna put a road down. So this is Woodland Scenic. We did this on the HO. How many saw the HO one? Anybody? A couple of people? Okay, the HO one we have a road. This stuff works really good. You use tape, you put paving tape down.
The tape is just an edge. Basically what we're doing, this is a foam tape that you put it down where you want the end of the road. And this is, it's about a 16th of an inch. And you're basically making a little frame for it to put the plaster in. And this is not lightweight winter tile. It's more like plaster of Paris because it works a little differently. It's a little smoother.
And I have a story. Use this tape. I tried another time to use. I have some tape that I have that was about the same thickness, but it wasn't smooth on top. And so when you go across it, because you put the tape down, you pour the plaster in. And by the way, before you do it, make sure it's level. Another thing that you can really mess up, because it will seep different heights. So you put it down, but you need that smooth tape. You could use other tape if it's absolutely smooth, but don't use something that's got a texture to it.
This is smooth on one side and sticky on the other side, so it sticks down. We're going to put a cement block here, put the station on, and to come over to this building. It's a ground level station, so it will come right up to the tracks. Now, what I'm going to do is I've got a little piece of styrene, and I'm going to glue that right next to the rail, and that's going to be my gap. And I'm going to, for one side of this little trough, it's going to be the rail and this styrene. And then I'm going to pour the cement in and I'll smooth it to that. And then when I'm finished, I'll pull this out, and this will leave me a gap, but a cement like rail rubber.
Okay. The other thing is, this stuff takes a while to dry. I recommend that you sort of figure how much you need and do half as much, and then add as you go forward, or you're gonna waste it. It doesn't take much on that HO one. It was probably this much of the package, and that one's a big. Anybody that saw it, it's a big area. So
You probably have 10 to 15 minutes at the most working time.
Yeah.
You might not have that one.
but the stuff mixes very quickly. And then mix it in something. What I use is, I eat a lot of cottage cheese, and I use the cottage cheese thing, so I toss it, whatever it hardens in. Because here's the other thing, on all the plaster, don't, he's got something fancy. I'm too cheap to buy that.
No, this was an M&M thing. I don't even remember how I got it, but it's rounded. It's got, if it didn't have, there's a little bit of a seam down in the bottom, which you can tell I still get some plastic. But because it's rounded, it's easy to clean out, even though it's a hard plastic. So this is what I use to mix my small batch of plastic. With the water, I think we need to go back to water. We're talking about mixing. With the water, you use throwaway.
You have to.
You have to, because anything you put it in, it's ruined. And so I just get plastic cups to mix. I got little, use 2 parts, so I use at least 3 cups. I use 2 little cups for the equal parts, and 1 bigger plastic cup to mix.
Do not wash out any plaster in any sink. You'll find out the hard way, it's rather expensive. Why? Okay?
Yeah, you dump it in the toilet. The toilet's got a big enough drain to handle it. Sink's
Or,
don't.
well, that's why I use something I can throw away, and I just throw it away. I don't even try to save it. So, okay? Anything else? Did we forget anything?
We talk about the rocks. The rocks. No, we didn't. Yeah, there is something else.
Okay.
When we put in the rocks in, you notice down here, it's got a flat back, and it doesn't really fit. Well, the bigger the rocks, the more that is. But if you notice here, there's a different color material here, and this is just either Sculptamol, or Woodland Scenic makes something, or Plaster of Paris, or lightweight spackle, anything to fill in behind the rocks to smooth it into your scenery area. There's, like I said, a bunch of stuff you can use. The bigger the rock and the bigger the fill, you probably want to use something like Sculptamol or paper mache. Sculptamol is a paper mache type product. And so this I had sticking up here, and this all backfill is this. It works. It works like clay, but it's not clay. It's like 4 or 5 different types of stuff you can use. The lightweight spackle you want to probably keep to small areas because that's relatively expensive, where this other stuff is cheaper.
A lot cheaper. Okay, now, if you have, before we open the questions, if you have questions or anything, this is my email. It's also, you can look on the Coast Division and get how to contact me. Don't hesitate. I'm pretty good about answering email, so if I don't get back to you in a few days, I'll write again. People have said every so often an email doesn't go through. I don't know why. I know I've sent stuff out that doesn't go through. So I'm pretty good about it, and that's the easiest way to contact me. I'm not a phone person. The best thing about this phone is the camera. The lousy phone. Anybody work for Apple? Oh, good. I didn't offend anyway. So, any questions? Yes, Mark.
Plaster of Paris, what's that used for?
Actually, I don't use it at all. I either use hydrocal or dental plaster, but it's a plaster just like any other.
It's heavier than lightweight hydrocal. You can use it for molds. You can use it for the backfill. It's the backfill. I like the lighter weight paper mache type stuff.
Where can you get the paper mache stuff?
Beverly's, Michael's, all these type of stores.
Hobby Lobby, any of the hobby.
No, I won't recommend Hobby Lobby.
Well, I'm just, if they live over at
That's my
Dublin.
political comment.
Okay.
Well, Michael has it.
Yeah, Michael's has it.
They'll have different brands. Sculptamol is a brand, but what it is, it's a celluloid clay. It's not called, sometimes they call it clay, but it's not clay.
What does Michael call it?
I just bought some there, and I can't remember now.
If you just go, yeah.
It's Celia something.
Sodium clay, I think.
Yeah.
Sodium clay.
Yeah, and the clay part is misleading because it's not really clay.
And don't buy anything there without getting a half off.
Yeah, that's what I
Or at least your discount, your senior discount.
Yeah.
You're a veteran, you get something off too.
Tom, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm curious, how did you paint the rocks to get that, you know, it's not a consistent paint color, how did you do that?
Multi-coats, some of which are watercolor. Now, watercolor is different than poster colors. Watercolor is a transparent color.
Okay.
So I have about 4 or 5 coats of different colors that I put on all the rocks.
Mhm.
And then I usually end up with a light yellow, either watercolor or a very diluted pigment, and that gives a dusty effect. And I usually will start off after my base color with a black coating to fill in the cracks to give the depth effect.
So to get the texture, you got just different thicknesses in different places?
If you use the earth colors, I do similar, but I use the tube paints and mix it and then spray it or brush it on. You can use any of the earth colors, vary it. You know, at first it looks really sloppy, but that's sort of what you want, because when you put I'll usually put a final coat of like a watered down Indiana ink wash on it. That goes into crevices and brings out shadow detail. Forget who it is that actually goes in and colors, actually uses black paint to really bring it out. I've seen that, it looks really good.
But it's, you know, you start off with the base that I molded in, and then you just keep adding. Like, all of this is adding layers. The whole secret to scenery is you don't do it all at once. You act as sloppy as possible and add layers.
And that actually goes for like wood structures. When I build a structure, there's 5, 10 treatments till I get what I want. That's how painters do it, right? They build up layers, and that's, you know, and lots of times you want it translucent a little bit so the other layer shows through.
And something else, when you look at this, you might want to look. I painted the track base up here. This is left unpainted. You can tell, look and see the difference. The painting makes it look a lot better. I mean, this doesn't look horrible, but you look up here, it looks a lot better.
How do you use the painter?
I just use water-based paint.
Right, yeah. I don't think there's much reason anymore, at least as far as scenery, to use anything but water-based. And mineral-based on this is really not a good idea. Some of it will attack this.
By the water base, you're talking about like the apple barrel.
Yeah, or any acrylics, any watercolors. I like pigments.
Pigments. Woodland scenics are pigments. The stuff you get at the craft stores are, but you can get the poster colors and the acrylics. The acrylics are a little too shiny, I think. The poster colors and the other water-based paints. You can always, I always dull coat things anyway, but I like to stay away from shiny anything.
Other questions?
You know how much that weighs?
The two of us could carry it really easily. One person, I could carry it, except it's awkward.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you're welcome to come up and lift a corner, you'll see it isn't, it's probably 30 pounds.
And you can lift this by comparison, you can see that there's not that much more weight. This is about 2 inches wider. I cut it down, but I cut it down, I measured it wrong, but it fits
Fitting is important.
for us. But yeah, fitting when you're doing it at home and not moving it, the fitting is what the space you have.
Yeah, so let's say I was gonna do this at home. I would make it a few inches wider so there was more scenery here and a few inches over there. The back probably doesn't matter as much. I would also have something that I could put across here to hide the, you know, I'd use black foam core, you know, and then you don't see
It's
it.
a view, because from over here you can see through it, you know, you want
So
it.
if I do this, you can't.
But you want something removable.
Yeah. Well, I'm removable.
Okay, other questions? Yeah, Mark.
I got in kind of late, but I heard you say something costs $1 and everybody can use it.
I said, I go a lot to the dollar store, so like a lot of the things you can get at the dollar.
Tools.
You can buy all kinds of stuff, you can buy sifters that we're talking about.
Oh, okay.
You can go online to the dollar store now, you know that.
I didn't know that, you can.
You want-
Keep shopping there, I always stop.
You know, I buy these cheap readers at the dollar store. You know, they're $1 instead of like 12 or 15. And then I have an ultrasonic cleaner, so every so often I drop them in there, turn it on, and they come out pretty clean. They're not as good as the expensive ones, but, you know, I only need it when I gotta read something close. I use Optivisor for model bills. You know.
I use two different degrees of optimizer for model.
So do I. Any other questions? Okay, again, this is how you get a hold of me if you have questions. You know, I'm pretty good about getting back to people. So thank you all for coming, and you can get the second half of the roundtable next door, I think. Okay? Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. You can walk around. Turn this off. Hopefully it's still going. Oh, it is. Amazing.